Well, for the first time in about a year, something new is going on in Libya. I kind of stopped touching on Libya because there seemed to be just a never-ending stalemate in the battle for Tripoli, which started way back in April 2019. I remember discussing it at the time, and Khalifa Haftar, the wannabe strongman, one of Gaddafi's former generals, who's now wants to be the new Gaddafi, the new military dictator, was trying to seize the capital for a year, and failed. And actually, he was just pushed back, a few weeks ago by the Turkish-backed government there. The Turks have been backing the GNA, the Government of National Accord, with quite a lot of their might in the past few months. In fact, I think that I was hearing stories that the Turks were actually sending Syrian refugees to go fight in Libya. Although they were jihadis, they weren't exactly, just innocent people trying to find safety. But I guess now the Turks are also sending, regular Turkish troops who are professional and are actually helping the Tripoli government get some things done. And so while Haftar still controls, the vast majority of the geographic area of Libya, he's lost a lot of space around the capital. And so now the GNA is going on the offensive, and they're just going to try and take back ever more territory from Haftar. And so this is a pretty remarkable moment. We're seeing Haftar lose ground for the first time. But old Sisi from Egypt, the Egyptian dictator there, he's not having any of this. He has drawn a red line, kind of like I guess Obama drew a red line, but Sisi sounds like he plans on enforcing this red line, and his red line is Sirte. Sirte is a coastal city where I think they import and export a lot of oil from there. For obvious reasons, the GNA government wants to retake Sirte, I think to, get back access to oil again. One of Haftar's big advantages is that he's been able to control most of the oil in Libya. And so obviously it might be a fatal blow for him to lose Sirte. And so therefore, one of his major backers, Sisi of Egypt, who is right next door and has, the greatest interest in the outcome of the war in Libya, has threatened to intervene directly, meaning that the Egyptian army would cross the border and invade Libya on behalf of Haftar, just as the Turks have invaded Libya, on behalf of the GNA. And so, things are shaping up right now for there to be an actual armed conflict between Egypt and a NATO ally, Turkey. Now, this is, I think I talked about this possibility many months ago in a video on Libya, but this is an interesting bit of a predicament, because what you would have here is you would have a not so friendly NATO ally in Turkey. A country that's not too close to the U.S. anymore, going up against a non-NATO ally, but a country that is quite close to the U.S., Egypt. Now, luckily, we don't have to worry about the NATO treaty itself, since Turkey can't invoke the NATO treaty since they weren't attacked themselves. They are involved in this conflict over there, and so if some other country, attacks them while they're there, the NATO treaty would not cover that. The NATO treaty covers, hey, I'm getting invaded by the Russians, come save me. Now, politically, there's another layer to this, which, has threads going back, all the way to the Arab Spring, and that is the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is the dominant faction in the GNA. That's why the Turks are backing them, because Muslim Brotherhood is basically another way of saying that they're Turkish aligned. The Muslim Brotherhood are essentially conservative Muslims that wear Western business suits. They hold elections, but they believe in, just being pious religious people and enforcing that, on society. And so this is a different model of government from the secular dictators of folks like Mubarak, Gaddafi, or in this case, Sisi and Haftar. And so, each of these sorts of styles of well, it's hard to call Turkish Middle Eastern, but I guess you could say Islamic leadership for all Muslim countries. They want to see more governments like themselves. For Turkey, every time that there's a new Muslim Brotherhood government, that essentially becomes something within Turkey's sphere of influence. Erdogan wants to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. And Sisi is a man who stood in the way of that. Egypt, after the Arab Spring, got a Muslim Brotherhood government in the face of Mohammed Morsi. But Sisi overthrew Morsi in a coup, putting an end to any chance that the Turks had at once again, influencing Egypt. And so now that Sisi is firmly, in control of Egypt, he doesn't want to see the Brotherhood and Turkey, gain influence in his next-door neighbor. He wants to make sure that somebody like himself comes to power in Libya. And so it's by no means crazy to think that Egypt would invade Libya on behalf of Haftar if they felt like they needed to. This isn't like, America interfering in Syria just for the heck of it. Egypt has, real issues at stake here. Think about if a Chinese-backed government, took over Canada. I'd imagine that's something that the U.S. would never let happen. Now, if this does end up occurring, the big question is, how does that change things? Are the Turks going to send in more resources into Libya to try and bolster the GNA further, to counteract whatever the Egyptians throw at them? And in that sense, if it got to an all-out kind of war, well, who has greater resources? Is it Turkey or is it Egypt? I would tend to think that it'd be Turkey. Turkey has a pretty massive military, and Egypt is, they're not really up to NATO standards. They are, a typical third world Arab military. The Turks have been fighting now for quite a while in the Middle East, and so the experience that they've amassed would seem to give them a bit of an advantage in my mind over the Egyptians, who haven't really been in any major wars that I can think of. Sure, they get lots of weapons and things from the United States, but so did Turkey until recently, and the whole dropping of the F-35 project from Turkey's repertoire. I would tend to think, though, that if Egypt does invade, the Turks will have to do much more of the heavy lifting on pushing back on Egypt than Egypt will vis-a-vis Haftar's army. Haftar is closer to Sisi in terms of their actual military might than the GNA is to Turkey. Essentially, the GNA doesn't have a military. There's a bunch of militias and things who don't like Haftar, who are fighting to defend the GNA, but the GNA itself does not have a standing army, so to speak. That's why they had to have the Turks come in and essentially be their real army. So I guess that's all we really know for now. As of yet, there hasn't been any, official start to any conflict. Egyptian tanks have not yet rolled into Libya, but if they are going to, it will happen very soon, and I will have a follow-up on that, if and when it does. So if you gain anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.